Good morning and welcome to DubCity-fm. You're listening to CouncilMatters on this freezing morning, but don't you worry, it's all warmth in here because today I've got one of the new faces in Dublin politics, or in Irish politics even, Carly Bailey from the Social Democrat Party. Carly, welcome to CouncilMatters.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
And Carly, I believe congrats are in order. You were recognised by your peers in the party, deputy chair. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's amazing actually. Yeah, I'm delighted. We had our national conference last weekend in Dundee, and obviously we were sort of putting together our new national executive and our chair and vice chair. So I had decided to run for vice chair, and the party decided that I would be the best person in that position. I'm absolutely thrilled. And
not only that, you won it by a considerable margin as well. So that's a big endorsement, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah, absolutely.
And in the centenary of women getting the vote, it's long overdue in many respects in Irish politics.
I would completely agree with you there. Thankfully, the Social Democrats, we don't really have much issues in terms of women participation, so it's great.
Yeah. Tell me now, Carly, I said you're a new name to politics, and we were told about 4 years ago, we're going to get a new politics. Now, what I've seen over the last 4 years, it's anything but a new politics. It's business as usual. Why were you motivated to get into politics, and also why the Social Democrats?
Well, a couple of reasons, I guess. I mean, I didn't come from a political family or background or anything like that. But I suppose when the economic crisis hit, the recession, my husband and I were really badly affected by that. Mm-hmm. So we're on 10 years of going through absolute hell, basically since that started. We both lost work. We had small children at the time. It was incredibly stressful. We ended up losing our home. Unfortunately, the debt is still due to a vulture fund, and it's been hell. And I guess I've always said it, like, politics happened to me. I suppose I always imagined politics was for, particular groups of people who don't necessarily know the answers, but they're the ones that always get involved, if you know what I mean. And I just sort of left them to it, which I see now is it's not the right way, and we need more people who have experience and in that kind of way,
Yeah, it's interesting. You called it the financial crisis. I would call it the economic crisis. I tend to call it the financial meltdown because this was largely driven by financial institutions in that regard. But let's step back a bit, Carly, because you came from a border town. Although you've lived in Dublin for quite some time, what's your memories of growing up there? Because you were around, as we say, when the Troubles were active. Did that impact you?
I think,
yes, or impact your environment?
Absolutely, without question. Anybody who grows up around the border or in the north, you can't, particularly in that time. So my childhood is memories of army, checkpoints and waiting for hours to get through, trying to beat customs to kind of bring back products that we bought in our local town, which would have been in Enniskillen in Fermanagh. Segregation, it was our normal. Like, don't get me wrong, that's kind of what we consider to be a normal situation, as many people will attest to. But yeah, the idea then that the Good Friday Agreement came in, I think I was 18 at that stage, so it was a long time living with what was going on.
Was that what I would call atmosphere of violence? Was it you have to deal with it if you live in an environment like that, but was it always there in the background, like a bad shadow, as we say?
It was definitely always there in the background. I mean, like, I couldn't tell you how many times we would have had, like, bomb scares and all that kind of stuff. Like, but it was in a really very strange way. It was very normal. You see, that it wasn't necessarily a shadow in the background. It was just there. It was part and parcel of life. We had, the bombing in Enniskillen and the Oma bomb. Then in particular would have been really upsetting. My family were actually around the area at that time. It was really scary. But it was always there. It was just part and parcel of it.
Yeah. Well, plus you had the ones when Dublin and the bomb got bombed as well.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have been born at that stage.
No, the Belturba obviously is just down the road from me where I come from. So.
And yet you didn't, as we say, gravitate towards what we would call the Nationalist Party, or if you like, the United Ireland Party. Is that based on your life experience?
I don't know. I think personally, I think I suppose I gravitated towards Social Democrats mainly because I would agree with them on practically every single issue that they stand for and policy that they have, particularly on social issues. I have no issue with Sinn Féin or anything like that. I mean, our politicians that would have represented us in our areas would all have been Sinn Féin, but I guess I got to a stage where I was just kind of sick of politics and sick of the violence and everything. I moved away from it, and I completely abandoned politics for a good 10-15 years, you know, until this stuff happened. And
You were a muso, I gather. Yeah.
It might be going a bit far. No, music's played a very important role in my life, all right, certainly. I would have been in bands since I was about 14, I guess.
Anybody I would have heard of?
No, I doubt it. No, it was very much sort of fun teenage stuff and original works, and then sort of cover bands and things like that, and selling our souls and all that. But it was great crack. Loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Look, it's what all teenagers want to do, isn't it?
Exactly.
You got to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, I only really stopped properly about a year or two ago, so. Just because I've just run out of time, but my husband still works in that. We met in a band. That's how we met.
Is he still in a band?
He's
Give him a plug. Give him a plug.
Brian Bailey and Gossip Band. They're a great wedding band. You should definitely book them.
Okay, well, anywhere they'll be playing, we should keep an eye out for what Gossip.
Gossip, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, look, it's good. It's a catchy name, as we say.
Absolutely, yeah, and they're great.
Yeah. You went to Trinity as well. Tell us, how did that come about? Because not only did you go to Trinity, you were a mature student, and my research tells me you were mature student of the year as well.
You did well on your background check, didn't you? Well, I guess when we lost the house and we lost our work, and I think at that time we kind of particularly figured that education was sort of the missing link for us, that every time we tried to get back into work, we struggled to try and get anything. We didn't have the necessary qualifications, so we both said, right, okay, we'll find somewhere to live, we'll go back to college and try and get ourselves back up again. So Brian went to Ttwo. I went to Liberty's College, just starting off like at a level 5 course in further education, like applied social studies, just because I was terrified. I left school with a dreadful Leaving Cert. I wouldn't even tell you what I got in my Leaving Cert. It was awful, and kind of really felt I went through life thinking I was just a bit thick, you know. So I started out like on this small course, and further education is so underrated. Like, it was amazing, and they were really encouraging and suggested that I keep going. So I applied for the Trinity Access programme, and I was gratefully started on that back in 2014. And from there, I wanted to become a social worker. That was what I wanted to do. But as I was studying more and more different subjects, I'm starting to realise that actually what happened to me wasn't my fault or my husband's fault. And I started to realise that it was very much a structural issue, and you know, who's in charge and how it gets affected. People on the ground are affected so badly. So I changed my course then. I decided to do law and political science, which, I mean, I don't know any solicitors or barristers or anybody in politics up until very recently. It would have been completely outside of my ordinary, normal life, you know, but it's a fantastic course, and I'm in my 3rd year now, so nearly there. Yeah.
It's an interesting one you should say that, because I was also rubbish at secondary school, mainly because I didn't like the teachers, they didn't like me. Yeah. But again, when I found, when I went to 3rd level, it's a different game altogether. I actually did very well, because I didn't have that antagonism, I didn't have that negativity, and I suspect you felt the same.
Very much. I mean, if you tried to do well in a test, like, you'd have got bet up.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't think the culture is quite the same as much now, but there's certainly huge issues around our education system, and you know, this idea of like trying to categorise schools in terms of like giving them classifications of who's doing the best, and all that. You end up with sink schools, and you end up with, you know, nobody in Dublin I can see lets their child go to their local school. They move them to the next best area school. Do you know that kind of way? Like, and I think that's we've got a lot of issues to work around that.
I hear members of the Social Democrat Party saying education is the key, education is the solution. Now, I'm based on my experience, I still believe the game is rigged, in the sense that if you went to the private schools, you have a much better chance of reaching certain levels than if you went to Christian Brothers, or if you want,
Absolutely,
or whatever. How do you feel about that?
I would absolutely agree with you. You look at the stats, the facts are there. It's pretty evident. 99% of kids leaving school in Dublin 6 go on to third level, and in my area in Tala, like there's only 24% go on to third level still. So there's a huge issue. The barriers, I suppose, into education, they don't just start at leaving third level. They've started long before that, and the fact that we have never, until very, very recently, like used any investment in terms of early education, never mind primary schools. I mean, we don't even have free primary educations in the system. I mean,
We don't really have a state education system, do we?
Yeah, the fact that we're still having to pay voluntary contribution charges, the fact that the schools' capitation grants aren't even covering their electricity bills. I mean, we don't have it. Like, so the investment hasn't been put into that, and particularly in the areas that really need that.
Tell me, when you went to Trinity, I know Trinity from the late 60s, when it was a very Anglo institution. It was either Anglo-Irish, British or Northern Irish people. So when somebody like me, who grew up in the North Inner City, went in there, I mean, you were like something out of Oliver Twist in that sense of the word, that it really was class ridden in that sense. How did you find that? You were more mature, as we say, when you went there, and you were probably able to look at it slightly differently. But were you conscious of that class difference when you went there?
Inevitably, yes. I mean, I worked in Dublin city centre for a long time in a cafe, and I didn't even know you could go inside the gates of Trinity College. I assumed it was for, these other people. And I mean, the architecture and everything, all the buildings within, like, they are absolutely stunning and they're beautiful, but they're also very intimidating
and cold.
Well, yeah, I've grown to really love it. I have, but certainly, they're. I mean, the people, the students themselves within the college, I think the vast majority of them are actually, like, they don't necessarily feel they're different to you, even though you feel very different. And I think the college itself is trying very hard to make it more open and to increase participation from non-traditional students. But there's still an awful long way to go, there's no doubt.
Yeah, I think there's my memory of Trinity at those times is that half the people spoke like Jacob Rees-Mogg, and not only that, but believed it. They also had a gun club. I don't know if that's still there, and that tended to be pretty much managed by Ulster Unionists. So, which is hardly surprising. It was a very different atmosphere in that sense of the word. So, law, you mentioned. Are you planning on practicing?
No. Is the very quick answer to that. I did hum and ha for a couple of years into the course, and I did a couple of different sort of days in some of the big fancy firms in town and stuff like that. And, I very quickly realised that actually the main remit for a lot of them is to provide companies that help companies avoid paying tax. And they talked a lot about sort of corporate responsibility, and, particularly around here in the inner city stuff, like, you can sort of see like these really, really plush, amazing offices. And then around the corner, you've got people living in really abject poverty, and helping the kids read the books is great and lovely and everything, but, if we were providing more into the actual social pot, we'd be doing a far better job, wouldn't we?
Well, I also think that if you thought that Trinity was class conscious, go down to the King's Inns.
I've been there.
And it's quite a different game altogether.
Now, don't get me wrong, I think a lot of people from the background genuinely do want to try and help, and are very dedicated to that in a lot of cases. But it's like everything. It's the way it's managed, it's the way it's run, and corporate responsibility can only go so far. And I think at the end of the day, it has to be up to the state to make sure that people are that the social floor is there, and that's something that has just been eroded away and away and away over time, which we really care about making sure that it's put back in place.
Let's move on to politics, because this year we could have a general election. This time next year, you certainly, if we haven't had a general election, you haven't got to become a TD, you'll certainly be planning for the local elections. I presume it'll be South Dublin Council you'd be looking at.
Potentially, yeah. I haven't made any decisions around that just yet. I'm very focused at the moment on being vice chair for the party, and we have quite a lot of candidates already in place, and we're still working on getting a hell of a lot more from around the country. So that's something that we're really fixated on now at the moment, really building that up. And I mean, you even look at last year or 2016 general election. We were talking about like women participation and things like that. You were sort of looking at the stats the other day, and it was great. Like Social Democrats were leading the way.
My observation of the Social Democrats is that you're very good at attracting women, and you're also very good at attracting young people. Not necessarily groups that vote, though.
Yes and no. We've also got a lot of people who would be quite highly educated as well, and also really know about social policy and economics and things like that. So it's a very broad church, I would call it, really. It's attracting all different types of people. A lot of activists are starting to get involved. I mean, that's certainly where I came from, my activism background and how I became part of it. Like, so I mean, yes, and maybe some of that particular group of people don't always necessarily vote, but that's something that we have to work on. And if you have a party that's established that actually gives people hope that actually the status quo might actually be changed in time, you know, a lot of people kind of give out about young people for not voting, and I've always come, well, do you blame them? Like, really?
Yeah. I did a report about 5 or 6 years ago, based on some study that was taking place, and it was essentially what it was trying to do was to see, was there a link between voting in local government, education, employment, and even, if you like, liberty. And what they discovered is that the areas that have the lowest participation in local government invariably have very high unemployment rates. They would have quite high or very low uptake in third level education, and usually they make up a lot of the prison population. That must be a concern.
It's a huge concern.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've always said it, and I completely shied away from politics for so long because I just didn't feel that anybody in the Dáil either looked like me or felt like me or would have experienced anything that I've experienced, you know. And I do think that's starting to change. We're starting to see some really, I think, exciting, fresh new people in there. But there's also people who've been there for an awful long time who know so much about this. But the status quo thing that we keep talking about, you know, it has been allowed that particular people become a politician because their father was, for example. I mean, like that doesn't necessarily mean they have the answers to situations. And if you're in an area which has been decimated by the cuts during the austerity budgets, and for years, generations prior to that, underinvested and basically left to just rot, for want of a better word, I don't blame people for feeling, what is the point in voting? It makes no difference. That's why I wanted to get involved in this particular party. I felt hope. I felt like, okay, there's actually people here that really strongly believe that we need a strong economy, but that means we bring everybody with us, not leaving large groups of society marginalised and off to the side, you know.
Just before I come in this morning, I had a quick look at the participation figures, is the way I would call them, in the last local election in South Dublin. Not one ward had 50% vote. Not one. I think Tala Central, 30%. In other words, 70% of people felt sufficiently alienated from politics that they couldn't be bothered. A fair chunk of them must be women as well. So it makes you wonder, after 100 years, have we turned out a system where it's by and large, if you want to get involved in politics, you're more likely to be an activist than a voter.
I would agree with you. I think the sort of single cause type projects, certainly that's how I started out, and it was like education stuff and housing and things like that. I think arguably you could also put to it like the fact that the local government system has really been depleted of its power. Particularly over the last number of years, you know, a lot of that has been placed now in central government. So, I mean, a lot of the councillors that we work with that are part of the party will argue that we need a properly democratically elected mayor, that this CEO who they're these non-elected, non-accountable people.
What, for Dublin?
For Dublin, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's interesting.
And you know, a radical alteration of how local government works, because it's clearly not working right now. We can see that with the housing stuff and all the rest of it. Councillors themselves will say they just genuinely don't have a huge amount of power or say in how their local areas get run. Yeah,
well, it's again an interesting one. You should say that, because if you ever saw a programme a couple of years ago that Dermot Ferreter did about the history of Ireland, and he did one specific programme on local government, and he was very clear about it. Local government was designed particularly not to threaten central government, and it was specifically intended to stifle Dublin. I mean, again, off the top of the head, how do you feel? Do we have too many councils here? Would we be better off with a regional government rather than than four talking shops? Is effectively what we've ended up with.
And certainly the councillors would be of the opinion that we need to look at sort of reconciling that and making it a potentially somebody directly elected who has a vision and a plan about how to run Dublin as a whole. I mean, in our particular area, so we've got like Dublin southwest bordering into Dublin south central, but then you've got like the council points. They quit at the Walkinsdown roundabout.
Yeah.
And the rules that related to the road traffic up to there are completely different to the rules that there. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and it's very difficult to work together then as units. Obviously you want to make sure that local communities are represented and are heard, and I think what we're trying to establish is a policy that will amalgamate all of that, and I think would really make a huge impact on local communities and having it all heard. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to apply just to Dublin either. That can be something that can be rolled out across the country.
Well, based on your experience, do you think we are likely or potentially likely to get more people to turn out to vote if they are getting an opportunity to vote for people they can identify with, people who've got experiences that they can relate to?
Yeah, I'm quite sure of it. I know I will vote for somebody who I feel, at least, even if they're not necessarily gone through what I've gone through, because I'd like to think most people haven't, because God, no. However, understanding what we've been through and understanding those difficulties. But also one of the other part, one of our councillors in Dublin South West, Dermot Looney, had created the participatory budget in Dublin South Council. So it was a case of communities were able to actually have a proportion of the budget for the council and vote on different things, projects and things within their own communities that they'd like to see, and that's something else we'd really like to I think if people feel more involved and are participating within the actual structure itself, I think that could have a huge impact too.
Let's have a look at, we could have a general election by the end of the year. I'm not necessarily convinced we will, but one issue that we are going to have smack in our faces by the summer is Repeal the Eighth. You're a mother, but you're also involved with one of the Repeal the Eighth campaigns out in Dublin South area. What's your view on that? Why did you get involved in that?
Why did I become involved in that? Well, I suppose I would have always have been pro-choice, even if I didn't even know what the word pro-choice meant. I always would have felt that women and pregnant people should have a right to decide what happens in their lives. But the last number of years, I suppose we've had quite a lot of high-profile cases before the courts and things like that really sort of enamoured me to kind of want to start getting involved more vocally as well, and becoming a parent, in and of itself, fundamentally made sure that I understood that, to become a parent, it should always be a choice. It's one of the best things that ever happened to me, but it is one of the hardest things that people should choose to do. You know what I mean? It's not easy, and it can be very amazing and all that, but everybody has and deserves a right to choose when it is they start a family or grow their family. I mean, the stats will show that over I think it's 54% of people who choose to end a pregnancy are already parents, and often the reason cited is that they simply can't afford to have another child in the family. They're struggling to manage what they have with what they have, so I'm very glad to hear that there will be a referendum called. It sounds like it's going to be the end of May at this point, and certainly we'll be campaigning quite strongly in favour of repealing the Eighth.
There'll be an entirely new demographic this time round, because I don't think you got to vote the last time round.
Three.
You were three, so you certainly wouldn't have. I wasn't even in the country, so I didn't. And one of the things I think is going to be different this time round is that the pensioner generation is different from the previous pensioner generation. How are you? It's early days, but I know on social media I have been getting some horrendous stuff for daring to suggest that I might consider voting to repeal the Eighth Amendment. As a politician, some politicians are going to play it safe and they'll sit in the fence and they'll be considering and taking advice and all of that. Are you concerned that you could damage your chances in either a local or a general election by taking what is essentially a principled stand?
No, I genuinely believe, and the party particularly is key on this, that we stand for policies that are evidence based, that are good for the general population as a whole. We don't choose policies just because they might be, electorate friendly per se. And I think honestly that is what attracted me to the party in the first place, that they're prepared to take a stand and prepared to say this is what we believe in, even if some people don't like that. I think that's brave. I also think it's the right way to do politics. That to me is new politics.
Yeah. An interesting one that I remember when I was about 14, we were renting because we had always rented up to that time, and then suddenly the person we were renting from got married and we were about to get thrown out of our house. So I understand, or at least can relate to the to a certain degree, to the trauma that you must have experienced at the time. I had a guest on 2 weeks ago, and we were same thing. We were talking about housing. There is nothing in the Irish Constitution that guarantees shelter.
No.
There is no obligation on local government to actually provide housing. Is that something you'd like to see changed?
I think it's something that has to really change. I think there's two different schools of thought on it. Some sort of assume that if we have a constitutional right to shelter, that it will be the be all and end all, and it'll solve things. And lots of other countries have it in their constitution, but they still have a homelessness problem. However, I do think it's something to work toward. I think it would help change and shape policy better to ensure that people aren't left without somewhere to be able to keep their head. I mean, we had the snow the last couple of days, and I should be excited about that for my kids. They can go out and make a snowman, but I can't anymore. I get no joy from it because all I can think about is about those poor people. Oh, I just get very upset by that.
Yeah, no, I know exactly how you feel, because I was putting out the bins last night and I thought, oh my God, can you imagine being out in this?
Yeah,
there's absolutely no reason for it to happen. We are about to, unfortunately, we could talk all afternoon, Carly, because you're, as I say, your bio was so interesting. If you were to send out one message as to why people should start paying attention to Social Democrats in the next either local or national election, what would it be?
I think we signify new politics. We have Roisin Shorehall and Catherine Murphy in the Dáil, who are just two amazing, incredibly articulate and strong women who really do know what it means to have a fair, better solution to our society. So we're following in behind that, and I think keep an eye out for us, hear what we've got to do, see the work we're doing on the ground, and you'll know why.
Carly, it's been a pleasure talking to you today.
New
politics, new people. I want to thank Catherine for doing such a fabulous job on the desk. I'm Mick Fitz. I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time. Don't go anywhere, because Sean Brophy is coming up with midweek music miscellany. Take care.